Pre-colonial Rwanda was a highly centralized kingdom presided over by Tutsi kings who hailed from one ruling clan. The king ruled through three categories of chiefs: cattle chiefs, land chiefs, and military chiefs. The chiefs were predominantly, but not exclusively, Batutsi, especially the cattle and military chiefs. While the relationship between the king and the rest of the population was unequal, the relationship between the ordinary Bahutu, Batutsi, and Batwe was one of mutual benefit, mainly through the exchange of their labor. The relationship was symbiotic. A clientele system called Ubuake permeated the whole society. In 1899 Rwanda became a German colony. After the defeat of the Germans during WW1, subsequently in 1919 Rwanda became a mandate territory of the League of Nations under the administration of Belgium. The Germans and the Belgians administered Rwanda through a system of indirect rule. During this colonial era, a cash crop economy was introduced in Rwanda, and this was administered through harsh methods that further alienated the king and his chiefs from the rest of the population. In 1935 the Belgian colonial administration introduced a discriminatory national identification on the basis of ethnicity. Banyarwanda who possessed 10 or more cows were registered as Batutsi, whereas those with less were registered as Bahutu. At first, the Belgian authorities, for political and practical reasons, favored the king and his chiefs, who were mostly a Batutsi ruling elite. When the demand for independence began, mainly by a political party, Union Nationale Rwandaise, UNAR, formed by people from the aforementioned ruling elite, the Belgian authorities hastily nurtured another party called Parmehutu that was founded on a sectarian ethnic ideology. Under the Belgian supervision, the first massacres of Batutsi at the hands of the Parmehutu occurred in 1959. With Belgian connivance, Parmehutu abolished the monarchy amidst widespread violence. On July 1, 1962 Belgium granted formal political independence to Rwanda. Climate and geography of Rwanda. Land area, 26,340 square kilometers. Population, 11 million. Rainfall, rainy seasons, March, May and October, November, average of 110 to 200 millimeters per month. Average temperature, 24.6, 27.6 degrees C. Hottest months, August, September. Altitude, ranges from 1,000–4,500 m above sea level. Main water bodies, Lake Kivu, Lake Muheza, Lake Ihima, Lake Bulera, Lake Ruhondo, Lake Mugizra. Vegetation, ranges from dense equatorial forest in the northwest of the country to tropical savanna in the east. Main national parks/animal reserves, Akagera and Virunga Volcanoes National Parks. Highest point, Karisimbi Volcano, 4,507 m, borders, Uganda to the north, Tanzania to the east, Burundi to the south and Democratic Republic of Congo to the west. Rwanda is a landlocked country situated in Central Africa. Also known as the Land of 1,000 Hills, Rwanda has 5 volcanoes, 23 lakes, and numerous rivers, some forming the source of the River Nile. The country lies 75 miles south of the equator in the Tropic of Capricorn, 880 miles as the crow flies west of the Indian Ocean and 1,250 miles east of the Atlantic Ocean, literally in the heart of Africa. Rwanda is bordered by Uganda to the north, Tanzania to the east, Burundi to the south and the Democratic Republic of Congo to the west. Anyone visiting the Land of 1,000 Hills is in for a multitude of surprises. The loveliness and variety of the landscapes in this green country is dominated to the north by volcanoes and bordered by Lake Kivu to the west. In Rwanda the great animals of the wild are protected from poachers and roam free in the vast national parks. The Volcanoes National Park in the Virunga Volcanic Mountains with its high-altitude forests, are world famous for mountain gorillas, timid and passive family-oriented giants, which is teeming with wildlife both large and small, while Lake Kivu to the west offers beautiful beaches, jutting peninsulas, and an archipelago of islands. Culture and history. Pre-colonial. Pre-colonial Rwanda was a highly centralized kingdom presided over by Tutsi kings who hailed from one ruling clan. The king ruled through three categories of chiefs: cattle chiefs, land chiefs, and military chiefs. The chiefs were predominantly, but not exclusively, Batutsi, especially the cattle and military chiefs. While the relationship between the king and the rest of the population was unequal, the relationship between the ordinary Bahutu, Batutsi, and Batwe was one of mutual benefit, mainly through the exchange of their labor. The relationship was symbiotic. A clientele system called Ubuake permeated the whole society. Colonial. In 1899 Rwanda became a German colony. After the defeat of the Germans during WW1, subsequently in 1919 Rwanda became a mandate territory of the League of Nations under the administration of Belgium. The Germans and the Belgians administered Rwanda through a system of indirect rule. During this colonial era, a cash crop economy was introduced in Rwanda, and this was administered through harsh methods that further alienated the king and his chiefs from the rest of the population. In 1935 the Belgian colonial administration introduced a discriminatory national identification on the basis of ethnicity. Banyarwanda who possessed 10 or more cows were registered as Batutsi, whereas those with less were registered as Bahutu. At first, the Belgian authorities, for political and practical reasons, favored the king and his chiefs, who were mostly a Batutsi ruling elite. When the demand for independence began, mainly by a political party, Union Nationale Rwandaise, UNAR, formed by people from the aforementioned ruling elite, the Belgian authorities hastily nurtured another party called Parmehutu that was founded on a sectarian ethnic ideology. Under the Belgian supervision, the first massacres of Batutsi at the hands of the Parmehutu occurred in 1959. With Belgian connivance, Parmehutu abolished the monarchy amidst widespread violence. On July 1, 1962 Belgium granted formal political independence to Rwanda. The Rwanda's Patriotic Front, RPF. Against a backdrop of entrenched divisive and genocide ideology, repeated massacres, the persistent problems of refugees in the diaspora, and the lack of avenues for peaceful political change, the Rwandese Alliance for National Unity, RANU, was formed in 1979 by some Rwandese in the diaspora with the objective of mobilizing Rwanda's people to resolve these problems. Almost a decade later, in 1987, RANU became the Rwanda's Patriotic Front, RPF, whose objectives were to promote national unity and reconciliation, to establish genuine democracy, to provide security for all Rwandans, to build an integrated and self-sustaining economy, to eradicate corruption in all forms, to repatriate and resettle Rwanda's refugees, to devise and implement policies that promote the social welfare of all Rwandans, and to pursue a foreign policy based on equality, peaceful coexistence and mutual benefit between Rwanda and other countries. The armed struggle. Most of the world had never heard of the RPF until October 1, 1990, the day the War of Liberation began against the military dictatorship in Kigali. Taking up arms was not an easy decision to make. War has always been the last option in the consideration of the RPF. However, all efforts for peaceful and democratic change had so far proved futile. It had become apparent that only by taking up arms could anyone wishing to put an end to the dictatorship and the violation of fundamental rights hope to succeed. The regime had amassed a huge coercive state machinery using violence to oppress the people. The taking up of arms against the regime was therefore considered not just a right, but also a patriotic and national obligation. When the war began, Rwanda's peasants, workers, students and intellectuals, men and women from every region and ethnic or social group, responded to the call of the RPF to rid Rwanda of dictatorship. With the beginning of the armed struggle, France, Belgium, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, then Zaire, hurriedly dispatched troops to Rwanda to support the dictatorial regime. The search for peace. As the war for liberation escalated, RPF still attempted to seek peaceful ways of resolving the conflict. On March 29, 1991, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, the RPF, and the then government of Rwanda signed the NCL ceasefire agreement, which provided for, among other things, cessation of hostilities, withdrawal of foreign troops, exchange of prisoners of war, and finally, serious political negotiations to end the conflict. Immediately after signing the agreement, the government of Rwanda ridiculed and ignored the said agreement, and the war intensified. The Arusha Peace Agreement. As the regime became more desperate, massacres of Batutsi in various parts of the country became widespread in a deliberate effort of ethnic cleansing. The regime used violence to harass and silence the emerging internal political opposition. Violence was also used to derail the peace process. After a long period of negotiation that took place in Arusha, Tanzania, the Arusha Peace Agreement was signed on August 4, 1993. The Arusha Peace Agreement was preceded by the signing of the agreement on a new ceasefire, as well as parties agreeing on the following principles: that there was neither democracy nor the practice of the rule of law in Rwanda, that a broad-based government of national unity, including parties of different political persuasions, was necessary to oversee the transition to democracy, that the Rwanda's army was not national in character, and that it was necessary to set up a truly national army from among members of the two existing armies, and that Rwanda's refugees have a legitimate inalienable right to return home. The agreement was structured around 5 pillars: the establishment of the rule of law, power sharing, repatriation and resettlement of refugees and internally displaced people, the integration of armed forces, and other miscellaneous provisions. Members of the ruling were particularly threatened by the power-sharing arrangements. The Arusha Peace Agreement threatened the basis of their power and privilege, which they had so far enjoyed without serious challenge. Given the fact that they had always relied on the army as the instrument of maintaining their grip on power at any cost, it is clear why they were very opposed to the idea of integration of the armed forces. The Arusha Peace Agreement was signed on August 4, 1993, and was supposed to have been implemented within 37 days, beginning with the establishment of the institutions of the Presidency, Cabinet, and the National Assembly. A United Nations force was supposed to oversee this process. RPF honored all its commitments when in December 1993 it sent 600 of its troops to Kigali, as well as members of the executive designated to be members of the transitional government. The regime, on the other hand, was focused on the preparation for genocide. The Arusha Peace Agreement was never implemented, although its principal provisions now constitute the fundamental law of the Republic of Rwanda. Genocide. The first massacres in Rwanda took place in 1959. Thereafter, almost in a regular manner, killings of the Batutsi became a common practice. In the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, and early 1990s, massacres of Batutsi were common. Between April and July 1994, over 1 million Rwanda's people, mainly Batutsi and some Bahutu opposition, were killed by the genocidal regime. Many people were involved in the killings. Those who planned and organized the genocide include the late President, Major General Juvenal Habyarimana, top government officials, including members of the so-called Provisional Government, the Presidential Guard, the National Gendarmerie, the Rwanda Armed Forces, FAR, the MRND-CDR militia, Interahamwe, local officials, and many Bahutu in the general population. Preparation to carry out genocide by these groups involved the training of the militia, the arming of both the militia and some sections of the population, the establishment and widespread use of a hate radio called Radio Television Libre de Mille Collines, RTLM, and the distribution of lists of those targeted from elimination. Repeatedly, these groups prevented the establishment of the Arusha Peace Accords. When the genocide began, the United Nations had a peacekeeping force, the United Nations Assistance Mission for Rwanda, UNAMIR, in Rwanda, of about 2,500 troops. The first reaction of the United Nations, and indeed of other nations that had their own nationals in Rwanda, was to withdraw their troops and their nationals respectively. Under the circumstances, the RPF had to fight again in order to stop the genocide. The fall of the genocidal regime. On July 4, 1994, the capital city of Rwanda, Kigali, fell to the forces of the Rwanda's Patriotic Army, RPA, the armed wing of the RPF. The members of the so-called provisional government, the armed groups, and many people who were involved in genocide, fled mainly to the DRC and Tanzania. Over 3 million refugees fled to Tanzania and the DRC. On July 19, 1994, the RPF established the Government of National Unity with 4 other political parties, the Liberal Party, PL, the Social Democratic Party, PSD, the Christian Democratic Party, PDC, and the Republican Democratic Movement, MDR. Weeks later a 70-member Transitional National Assembly was formed consisting of representatives of the RPF, the 4 other original parties plus 3 other smaller parties, namely, the Islamic Party, PDI, the Socialist Party, PSR, and the Democratic Union for Rwanda's People, UDPR, as well as 6 representatives of the Rwanda's Patriotic Army, RPA. Some key dates in the history of Rwanda. 15th to 19th centuries, clans in the area begin to merge into kingdoms. One of these, the Kingdom of Rwanda, becomes increasingly dominant from the mid-18th century, reaching its greatest extent in the 19th century. 1884, Berlin Conference sees partition of much of Africa by European colonial powers, following which Rwanda becomes part of German East Africa. 1914 to 1918, World War I. 1914 to 18, World War I, East African campaign see German forces defeated by British, Belgian, and Allied troops. Belgian army occupies both Burundi and Rwanda in 1916. 1922, Rwanda-Urundi becomes a Belgian League of Nations mandate. Both the Germans and the Belgians promote Tutsi supremacy, considering the Hutu and Tutsi different races. 1935, Belgium introduces an identity card system, labeling people as either Tutsi, Hutu, TWA, or Naturaliste. 1959 to 62, the Rwandan Revolution, ethnic violence in Rwanda between Hutus and Tutsis. Tutsi King Kigeri V and thousands of Tutsis go into exile in Uganda following the violence. 1962, Rwanda and Burundi become independent as separate nations. Rwanda, which had been a Tutsi monarchy under Belgian colonial authority, is now an independent Hutu-dominated republic. 1963, about 20,000 Tutsis are killed following an incursion by Tutsi rebels based in Burundi. Fighting between the two ethnic groups continues intermittently over the next 3 decades. 1973, Juvenal Habyarimana seizes power in a military coup. 1990 to 1994, Rwandan Civil War. The rebel Rwandan Patriotic Front, RPF, comprising Tutsi refugees, invades northern Rwanda from Uganda. The RPF condemns the Hutu-dominated government for failing to democratize. 1993, peace treaty signed. 1994, ceasefire ends when Rwandan President Juvenal Habyarimana and Burundi's President Cyprien Ntaryamira are killed when their aircraft is shot down by a surface-to-air missile. Most theories say the aircraft was shot down either by the RPF or government-aligned Hutu followers opposed to talks with the RPF. Mr. Habyarimana's death triggers the Rwandan genocide, perpetrated mainly by Hutus against Tutsis and moderate Hutus. About 800,000 people are killed. 1996 to 2003, Rwanda's invasion of DR Congo marks the beginning of its lengthy involvement in the neighboring country's 2 civil wars. 2003, voters back a draft constitution which bans the incitement of ethnic hatred. Paul Kagame wins the first presidential election since the 1994 genocide. 2005, government begins the mass release of thousands who confess to involvement in the 1994 genocide. Rwanda's 12 provinces are replaced by a smaller number of regions with the aim of creating ethnically diverse administrative areas. 2015, the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda holds its last hearings, 10 years after opening, and having convicted 93 individuals in connection with the 1994 genocide. 2022, DR Congo, UN, US and others accuse Rwanda of sending its soldiers to fight alongside M23 rebels in eastern DR Congo, who face accusations of carrying war crimes against civilians. Rwanda denies this. Conservative UK government and Rwanda agree to send some UK asylum seekers to Rwanda, amid considerable opposition in the UK. 2024, UK's Labour government axes Rwanda asylum scheme. Legal challenges meant no asylum seekers were sent to Rwanda. Travel and tourism. Rwanda sits at the hub of Africa, here at the center of the Albertine Rift, where deep volcanic forces are pressing the continental plates apart. You will find a world of exquisite beauty as well as unsurpassed biodiversity. Once termed Earth's most beautiful place by famous American humanitarian/author Rosamund Carr, and one of the most incredibly beautiful places of the African continent by www.mapsofworld.com. Rwanda is also famously known as the land of 1,000 hills due to its mountainous and irregular terrain. Rwanda offers breathtaking natural surroundings and as unique flora and fauna in its various national parks. Rwanda is the bridge between the forest ecosystems of the Congo basin along with the great rift valleys of the east. It shares in the biological riches of both worlds, offering a concentration of biodiversity found nowhere else in Africa. The country's natural assets include 6 volcanoes, 23 lakes, and numerous rivers. The spectacular volcanoes and dense tropical forests dominate the north of the country, while there are hills and valleys, lakes and rivers, and savanna as well as tropical vegetation in the rest of the country. The Parc National des Volcans in northern Rwanda is home to the world's largest number of endangered mountain gorillas, who live in a protected area and can be viewed in their natural habitats at a fairly close range. 670 different bird species have been recorded in Rwanda, as have 100 orchid species in the Nyungwe Forest National Park. Akagera National Park is a savanna park with typical wildlife lions, giraffe, elephant, hippopotamus, hyena, impala, and gazelle. There are also water bodies ideal for water sports and fishing, particularly Lake Kivu in the west and Lake Muhazi in the east. Lake Kivu also offers beautiful beaches, jutting peninsulas, and islands. Other tourism products include canopy swings in Nyungwe National Park, cave tourism, new city tours in Huye and Rubavu, mountain biking that offers riders just the perfect terrain to be enjoyed, fishing in Lake Kivu, and trekking, which includes mountain gorilla trekking that gives tourists the opportunity to observe the gorillas from a very close distance, see them rest, sleep, and feed. Thank you for watching this video.